But you've done this before.
All right.
Evening, everybody. I don't have a microphone, but I probably don't need one. And I'm just here to welcome you. I'm Ed LaValle, the city manager, and thank you for coming. Pretty good crowd, and this is our third iteration of this very important educational program. An informed public is our best tool to help protect our community. So here to talk about Florida-friendly landscaping, and conceptually, as you probably know, it's great landscaping that has little or no impact on our environment. That's our goal here. If you take some of the literature in the back, if you didn't get it, make sure you get it before you leave. Great tips on how to protect our environment in a variety of ways. Our objective is to sustain what God gave us in nature, not to destroy it, and to enhance what we can to protect what there is. Everything from the use of non-carbon footprint, utilizing tools to irrigate, educate, illuminate our environment. So Lorraine Anderson, our public information officer, is our key advocate and organizer for this event. So she's going to come down and talk to you about our guest speakers who have been well received here in the past. We appreciate the fact that they've come back from the University of Florida Extension Center. They are our experts on Florida-friendly landscape. This is part of a series of education that we've been involved in for about a year now. Part of the initiative was a result of red tide, which we know that some of what we do contributes to the exacerbation of that algae. Not all of it, we don't understand all of it, but again, an informed public is our best tool collectively. We'll work with each other to try to reduce the adverse effects that humankind has on our environment. And this is just one feature of it. So Lorraine, thank you, and thanks for organizing this.
Thank you so much, Ed. So this is great to see such a wonderful turnout. This tells me that everybody wants to learn these principles and these kind of standards of excellence for creating this type of landscaping in your own yard. I'd like to introduce to you tonight Wilma Holley and Dr. Pat Williams with the University of Florida IFAS, Sarasota County. They have a wonderful program. You're going to learn a lot tonight. And I would ask that if you do have any questions, to please jot them down, and we'll take them near the end of the program. So please welcome Wilma and Pat back to Venice.
See, we were going to start off threatening you not to ask questions because Lorraine told us to, and then she said she did that. So I guess we don't have to threaten you not to ask questions, things like that. I have to ask a question. Well, I'm going to ask lots of questions tonight, but are there any reporters in the audience? How many of you are not telling the truth now? All right, because if you are out there, we would like you to quote us correctly. And one of the things that's been misquoted is normally we do not do residential household visits to look at your landscapes because there's 400,000 of you and just 2 of us. So you do the numbers. But we will always be glad to help you. And with that, Wilma is probably the more famous of the 2 of us, right? Humble people usually are that way.
I've been here longer, that's all. That's the only difference.
And tonight we welcome you about Florida Friendly. We want to maybe dispel some preconceived notions about what this is. And as we travel around, if you notice the first slide, are both front yards the same? Or on both sides of the street, or whatever it looks like. And we want to say one of the first things is there's no ideal picture of what a Florida-friendly landscape is. I can't give you an example. Most of you picked up a book that if you actually utilize them will get you closer to what a Florida-friendly landscape. But sometimes you have to realize that your perception of what you believe to be Florida-friendly isn't always the truth. We have some Florida-friendly yards in the county that look kind of like my face, a little unkept. But it doesn't mean underneath that they're not a good Florida-friendly yard. People asked, why haven't I shaved? Because it's already warm. And I said, well, in case this is an unruly crowd tonight, I'll shave tomorrow and you'll never recognize me at Walmart. So with that, we're going to kind of go on. Remember, no questions, because Wilma will give you a stern look and things like that. Got to turn it on, Wilma. There you go. So our agenda for tonight. This is education. How many people know what extension is? Right, because there's going to be a quiz at the end, so study. So that's part of what we want to do, and then also get you lined up with what is Florida friendly and go over the 9 principles. We're being filmed now. We're either taking pictures, so smile at Lorraine. We try not to take ourselves too serious. Work ended at 5 o'clock, and so here we are, good or bad. So what is extension? For all those folks that raised your hand. Anybody? Sure, all those people who knew now know nothing. You could read it, but then there were a number of hands, right? You saw it. We counted. Well, we'll simply put, extension is a partnership between the county, the state, and the USDA. Why you had to sign on your forms tonight is because we have to report all the way up through the USDA for funding, and that's just part of what we do, and we're kind of used to that. If you look at the last statement down there where it says practical education, the true purpose of extension is to give all the new information that's gleaned at the university level, and we have 2 land-grant universities in the state of Florida, University of Florida, our employer, and then FAMU in Tallahassee. And both of those have the same mission to extend out to the public. If you've never been up to our office, we're located off of Clark Road in Twin Lakes Park. These are all the different areas and educators and agents and staff that we have. And as you kind of look through the list, almost any questions you would have in the home could be in here. We have the only chemicals in the environment agent in the whole state, and her job is to keep chemicals out of the environment. I think we have one of the few waste reduction, if not the only waste reduction.
1 or 2, yeah.
In the whole state. Oh, I thought Florida friendly was supposed to be underlined, but I guess it's just residential horticulture, which happens to be my position. I don't know why that one got underlined in italics, but and Wilma's not. But those are all the things. So we're always up there. And how many people have retired from business? Yeah, I bet those are the same people that said they knew what extension was. I'm not really going to pay much attention, but we are a really horrible business model. For about 110 years, we've been opening our doors and giving everything away for free. But yet, here we are. And with that, you paid nothing for tonight, so don't have very great expectations, okay? Because you get what you pay for. Wow, are you ever going to talk tonight? All right, first quiz. Landscape A, landscape B, landscape C. Which is the correct answer? Which is a Florida-friendly landscape? No cheating off your neighbor. They may be stupider than you. Well, don't yell out answers, then your neighbors can copy. You got it? You got the answers? All those for A. Raise your hand. Couple brave people. Good, good, good. How many for B? A few more. How many for C? How many refused to answer just because you were asked to answer? And then which? Okay, good. I like dissenters amongst the group. And the correct answer is D, all of the above. So nobody really answered C. Ornamentals, 50% turf, which is pretty much the county ordinance for developers. Fertilizer, irrigation, IPM, and all those other things like that. And that's kind of what we've already talked about, that you can't have such a narrow focus of what Florida friendly is, because then you would be wrong.
That's you too.
That's me too? Mm-hmm. So which one do you want in your backyard? The one on the right, the one on the left? Or combination, or either or. But see, the thing is, they both can be.
Oops, that's me.
Finally, Wilma gets to talk.
So Florida-friendly landscaping is an integrated approach to landscaping. It's, like he said, it's not any one thing. It can be a lot of different things, but the main thing was to conserve water. It was created in the mid-90s, 1990s, and it was basically started to protect our water resources. They're limited supply, and we have more and more people moving into Florida, so we've got to protect what we have, or we'll end up with worse problems than we had this past summer. And it's also to be friendly to wildlife. And most of the times we say, well, I don't want bears and tigers, in my yard. But it's not those kinds of wildlife. It's butterflies and birds and smaller, bees. We have to protect the bees or we lose a lot of our food. So it's that kind of stuff, and it's to protect all of that.
You're waiting on me now, aren't you?
Now I am.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's your turn.
All right. So basically kind of what she just said, but everything kind of goes to that. Have you ever lived in a state that's had a mandatory drought restriction ordinance? I've lived in California and Texas where we could not water. Are we ever going to get to that point in Sarasota County? We don't know. And so the first thing I would ask you is, what will your landscape look like in 3 months if you don't irrigate? Well, see, the whole thing is if you're really doing Florida friendly, then you should be able to say, it looks great. And that's part of this whole thing, is to get to the landscape, to eventually be self-sustaining off of what Mother Nature gives it. That's yours. I can't read that.
That's yours. Want me to do it?
I'll do it. Jeez.
Well, it's got your color on there.
I know. All right. So would you like to have a Florida-friendly yard? Raise your hand. Would you like to have a recognized Florida-friendly yard? Because Wilma will come out, and if you have a Florida-friendly yard, she'll put a placard in it, and then you will be the envy of all your neighbors. Do buy a security system with a camera on the sign, because one of your neighbors will steal it and put it in theirs because they are envious. So with that...
And that's one way to get us out to your yard, because I do come out and or some of my master gardeners that do the recognition. So you can get people out there. You just have to know the right tricks.
Or you do irrigation evaluations, and then they'll come out. But there's a whole guideline and a list, and you can either be a gold or a silver. And if you're ever interested in that, I have all of Wilma's cards right here. I'll be happy to hand them out for you, and you can call her.
So this is what there on the left. People think they're going to move to Florida, and that's what their landscaping and everything, they're not going to have to work in the yard. But on the right, that's kind of what it ends up being. But if you do Florida friendly, you can get more like the left than like the right. You have to do the work up front to get your yard in order, and then you really can relax a lot, because if you're putting the right plant in the right place, and we got these whole 9 principles, and if you follow those, you make your life a lot easier. There's always going to be some maintenance, some work, but it doesn't have to be that hard.
Then you're in stripes, but it's shorts and a short sleeve shirt. So
That's mine? Wow.
you got to do all this talking.
I didn't know that one was mine because I always hide that one. There's the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program is 30 yards in neighborhoods is what FYN is. And it's homeowners. There's also the Builder Developer Program, and also encompasses the Green Industries Best Management Program. And that's what the landscapers, the commercial people, they have to take lessons, classes, to learn how to do the right thing. That's not going to say they're going to follow them, but we try to teach them. But we also want to educate the general public so they know that when the industry people say, hey, that's what you're supposed to do, you know the difference. You can say, no, it's not. I want it done the correct way. And they have to start making the changes. Because we do see problems with especially palm pruning that isn't done correctly. So that's really, really important to follow that and to know that you do have a choice with your landscapers. So there's a lot of environmental concerns. As I said, that was one of the reasons that the whole program was started many years ago. A few years ago, it didn't seem like the 1990s were that far away, but we're almost to 2020, and it's like, wow, that was a long time ago. When I first started in the program, it was in the 1990s, although it had been around for a few years. But one of our most important natural resources is water. We can't live more than a few days without it, 7 days. And the misuse of fertilizers and pesticides has created some problems, and we're trying to change that. And there have been a lot of improvements in water quality in a lot of areas, but we still need to be very vigilant and keep going with that so that we don't have worse problems in the future. And 60% of Florida's fresh water is actually attributed to lawn use, to irrigation use, so landscape irrigation. So with that much water going there, if we can conserve half of that or not have to water our yard by doing the right things, it'll make a huge difference.
You kind of lost me because you said mid-90s. I was like 8 years old when you were already working here. So it's like, gosh, I was trying to do the math and everything. I was like, wow, Wilma's old.
So there are a lot of environmental concerns. By the 2060s, which is only, 40 years away? I don't do math well, but anyway, it doesn't
41 plus,
it's not that far away. The population is expected to double, and you'll see on the next slide when that picture changes, look at that. That many more people, they're going to need just as much water as we need, and that also increases pollution and habitat destruction, so we have to think about it every day, not just in the future or let your neighbors think about it. We all have to contribute to doing the right thing. So that's partly why that's a huge change. We have to protect it. So these are the 9 principles which I mentioned earlier. And the first one, right plant, right place, that's probably the most important, because if you get that wrong, you're going to be struggling with everything else. It's not going to work for you. Watering efficiently, obviously, if you put the right plant in the right place, you may not have to water, but if you have plants grouped together that need the same amount of water, then you can water those on a different zone. You can take care of everything correctly, and it goes on down the line. Fertilizing appropriately makes it, a lot of stuff doesn't need fertilizing. We do a lot more fertilizer, and Pat's going to be talking to you about that later. But mulching helps conserve water, it helps keep down weeds. So that's a huge difference in attracting wildlife. One of my favorites, but we don't have favorite children, but still, don't tell Pat I said that. It's
she knows important. I'm standing right here, right? My mic is on, my ears are on.
He doesn't pay attention to what I say, so he doesn't know I said it unless you all tell him. So attracting wildlife is extremely important because we all like to eat, right? So we got to have those bees. Managing yard pests, well, if we go spraying everything in our yard, what's going to happen to those bees that we just attracted? And that's what a lot of people do. They wonder why they're not seeing butterflies and bees. They're not seeing birds because they killed off the bees. And it's all connected. It's all these connected together. Recycling, leaving some lawn clippings on the lawn, not taking them off, leaving some leaves underneath the trees for your mulch. And then, of course, it all ties into reducing stormwater runoff, keeping the pesticides and the fertilizers on the lawn, the ones that you do use, and protecting the waterfront, because the more we abuse something or the more pollution that goes into the water, the more problems we have. So that's just it in a nutshell. You have more information in your book, and of course there's a lot more online as well. But
is there any reason not to use decorative rocks or
yeah, and
rocks as opposed to mulch?
We'll answer that at the end, but yes, there is.
So you're done. We thank you for coming. Any questions? Well, you just went through them all.
So we're going to go into all of them a little bit. This is the cornerstone of the FFL program. If we plant plants in the wrong place, one of the examples I like to give, if you're planting azaleas and cactus right next to each other, what's going to happen? Anybody have any idea? Azaleas need a lot more, one of them's going to die. Azaleas need a lot more water than cactus, and you can't water them the same. You need to have your separate hydro zones, and that's one of the things. But you also have to look at everything else in your site, the amounts of water that you're using, things that might need fertilizers or pesticides. Try not to use anything that's going to need a pesticide. There's certain plants that attract insects like crazy. Don't put them in your yard, then you don't have to worry about that. Thinking about things like that and planning ahead of time, overhead, your sidewalks, your hardscape, all those kind of things. Which way is the sun facing? All those. So you want to do your site analysis.
I feel useful. I'm Wilma's chauffeur and slide advancer.
So you want to do a site analysis first. You need to know what kind of soil you have. What kind of soil does everybody just about in Sarasota County have? Sand, which Pat says is not soil. But just about all of us do have sand, and almost all of the pHs are really, really high in Sarasota County. So that's something that you need to consider when you're picking out your plants, because some plants, like azaleas, the example I gave before, they need a very acid soil. So if you're planting them and then not changing your soil pH, you're always going to be struggling with your azaleas, gardenias too. You want to know if you have good drainage, bad drainage, because you can plant different kinds of plants there that can handle that kind of a situation. If you get standing water after a rain, you could make a rain garden there. There's a lot of different ways you can handle situations like that. So you want to check out your whole yard first and then make changes accordingly. I already mentioned the sun and the shade. You want to go in the house and look out your windows and see what kind of a view you have. Do you like to see the butterflies flying? Do you like to see some flowers while you're inside? Do you like a nice open landscape? So you want to look at things from every angle and plan that ahead of time. And then, of course, all the obstructions and things like that. I mentioned the utility lines, but the orientation of the house, the sun, which east, west, north, south, whatever way it's facing, that makes a difference as well.
Autograph, just don't worry, you keep on going.
But I need you to turn the slide.
I know, but autographs, I mean.
And as much as possible, choose low maintenance plants. You don't want to have to be pruning all the time. You don't want to spend your time all that extra work. It gets hot in the summertime. You don't want to have to worry about the plants. You can plant one of the worst examples we see in front of a picture window that's 3 feet off of the ground. Somebody puts a 10-foot plant, and they're having to prune it all the time. Plant something that only gets 3 or 4 feet tall, and then you never have to prune it. Maybe a little bit of shaping or a stray limb, and that's all. So you got to think about things like that. And then stuff that is suited to your landscape, suited to the right sun. We have HOAs that we go to, and they'll plant the same thing on the north side and the same thing on the south side. One side is not going to look good. They say, why do those plants over there not look good? Guess what? Those plants need sun, these don't. So that can make a huge difference as well.
And sometimes both sides of the street just look ugly.
Well, that's true, because they planted really bad plants. And you want a diversity of plants. You're trying to attract different kinds of birds and butterflies and things like that. So they need different things. They need some high plants, some middle of the road plants, and some low plants. They're understory. And the variety is gonna also seasonal interest, flowers. People are here in the winter and they got plants that only bloom in the summer. That's not going to do them any good. So you got to think about those kinds of things as well. Mature size, that's really, really important. That's like planting a small plant in front of the window. You also don't want them growing through areas where you don't want them. That one is always kind of funny. I actually did a site visit once, and somebody had cut a hole in their deck for a tree to grow through. Well, eventually the tree was going to get this big around, but it was also a prohibited tree, so by protecting it, they were actually breaking the law. But who would cut a hole in your deck for a tree to grow through? Move the tree. Anyways, so you always need to think about the mature size. The power line example is a huge thing that we see. People always planting things where they shouldn't have ever been in the first place.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
We are starting to hear back something that's a little bit disconcerting, that we are not a regulatory operation here. We are educational. And so we are hearing that some HOAs don't have us out because they're worried that we're going to fine them and point out all the things that are wrong. I mean, don't get us wrong. We will point out all the things that's wrong, but it's up to you to fix it. So we have no jurisdiction other than educational when we come out.
Sometimes we would like to be able to report you, but we can't. So I think there should be such a thing as plant police, because I would volunteer first thing, but I can't. So we're not going to report you to anybody. So
we will make examples out of you at our next presentation, but yeah. And yes, we will name your HOA and all those things, but no, we can't find you.
So if you've got a place where grass doesn't grow well, the people are always saying, what can I plant underneath my tree? The grass won't grow. plant a ground cover. Who wants to keep going in there and mowing and having all that dust blowing all over? Plant a ground cover that you never have to mow and let it grow out to the drip line, and then you've got a perfect situation because you don't need to be walking there, you don't need to be mowing there. And then also according to water needs, think about things like that. If something's not going to grow, why try to keep growing it? We have people that plant grass over and over. They say, I planted grass here 3 times, what can I do? Plant something different? It's rocket science.
Call my cousin, he owns a sod farm.
Yeah. I should. And sometimes turf is okay. We're not anti-turf too much. You have places, especially if you have children or pets, you need places for them to be running through the grass and stuff.
Neighbor's yard.
But you don't always. But sometimes in part of the design, it's nice to have that little border of grass. Usually we recommend 50% or less. And I think that, like he said earlier, the county ordinance says 50%. They have a landscaping ordinance. So that makes, but for a border, that looks a little bit better to have that grass on the edge in the picture there. And it can have a big impact on the design. It can make a huge difference when you're looking at something to see that change in what you're looking at and not have just plants. So it can make a difference. This is a before and after example. This is quite dramatic. We're not saying everybody needs to do this much, but it shows you different things that you can do. We have a couple of these, I think.
Are they ready?
Are you ready?
This is drastic.
This is.
Are you sitting down?
You got to say, oh, wow. Everybody should say, oh, wow. see.
Whatever.
Now go back and show them the before again, just so they can see the change. That's amazing that you can really... and not everybody would want to do that much, but you can make changes here and there. You can start in one area and then work, do different things each year rather than changing it all at once. It doesn't have to be all at once. And this one is pretty drastic as well. But again, these are people that don't want any grass. If you still want grass, there's no problem with that. We don't have any law that says you can't have grass. But you can see a pretty drastic example in those. It's your turn.
My turn. So what do you know so far? How many of your yards have all the right plants in all the right places? See, that's the problem with buying houses and developments that have everything already planted, because most of you won't. And so the next thing we bring up is, at what point in time do you start changing? Labor will never be cheaper. Plants will never be cheaper. And in Florida, if you take something out today, in 5 years, it's back to full size and you're enjoying it again. So instead of maintaining something just because it's there, part of this whole Florida friendly is starting to think about replacement. So what is watering efficiently? How many of you have an automated irrigation system that comes on? So leave your hands up if yours are efficient. Everybody can pretty much put it down, because if you don't, then we're going to come out. Why are they not efficient? Well, for several reasons. First of all, Wilma talked about hydrozones, which are placing plants together that need the same amount of water. When your irrigation comes on, how many of you have lawn being watered, the beds being watered, the car, the dog, neighbor's yard, and the side of your house all at once? And every one of those should be being watered differently. How many have a mature landscape that's over 5 to 7 years old? And how many are still watering the trees and the shrubs? So therefore, it's not efficient, because most of those things, and the whole premise behind Florida Friendly, is to get the plant old enough to take care of itself. And what people don't realize is that, yes, all plants have to be irrigated. Whether you're doing natives or not, they have to be irrigated until they're established, and then you wean off. If we happen to have a drought of a long term, like we did from end of summer 2016 through spring of 2017, then you can turn them on. Do you know that your automated boxes for your irrigation have an on-off switch? And do you know what the most prevalent problem we see this time of year? We see turf problems, and those are all caused by overwatering. How many times are you watering your turf right now a month? 4 times a month, once a week? How many are watering 8 times a week? How many live in the city of Venice? Do you know we have water restrictions of only 1 day per week? Did you get the gentleman's photo back there? Lorraine, did you get that? He's a rule breaker. Okay. That's why we have enforcement here tonight. So, but the whole thing is, does your plant need it? We go out and people say, well, I have to water my yard 3 times a week. No, you don't. Well, yes, I do. We had one person told Wilma that she knew nothing and that she had been doing it for 40 years and she knew more than Wilma. Well, is she here in the audience tonight?
I don't think so.
Okay. If you're here in the audience tonight, you remember telling Wilma that, well, you may not be totally correct. But that's all about watering efficiently. You have to know what your plants need, and then you have to deliver it. Too much water is not a good thing. How many of you irrigate during the summer when Mother Nature is raining 6 times a week? Once again, we have an off switch. How many of you irrigate before you get up? So your clock should come on. How many of you irrigate before midnight? You shouldn't. Everything should be after midnight. Why? Wilma told me to say that. I just, you know. The incident of fungal and bacterial infections happens more when we have freestanding water on the leaf blades. And most of our problems in the home landscape are fungal. And if they have 100% freestanding water, which is a water drop on the leaf blade, you all have spores in your yard because that's how fungal organisms spread. It's when we douse them in that drop of water for a length of period that they start to grow. So afterwards, how many water between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m.? That was a trick question. We were going to arrest you on that one. Yeah. How many of you have a pond, a well? Can you water more than what the ordinance tells you you can? No. Another trick question. How often can you use a low-flow irrigation system? That's one where you're using like soaker hoses and stuff like that. As much as they want. So if you really wanted to convert from irrigation over to other things, most everything in your yard could have low flow with the exception of your turf grass, and you should be reducing your turf grass anyway. I'm not really saying anything on the slides because I can't read them. I was already there. All right. But I took it off so they couldn't cheat. Oh, notice that one where it says irrigation audits. How many have ever done an irrigation audit?
There's a few in here that have one coming up.
All right. An irrigation audit. The night before your irrigation system comes on, you put some cans out in the yard. Generally things like tuna cans or cat food cans or something shallow that's not going to fall over. And you randomly place them. And the next morning when you get up after your system's gone off, you should only have between 1/2 inch and 3/4 of an inch of water. Anything over for your lawn means that most of that water is going beyond your root system and you're wasting it. We have people that are constantly putting out 1 1/4 inch, 1.5 inches, and with sandy soils we're losing all of that. Now if you happen to be applying nutrients, they're water soluble, they dissolve and they go past the root system and you can't get them. Wilma does free irrigation checks. I'll give her a plug for that because I no longer do them. So, got to keep Wilma busy. Where we need to get with water is eventually we need to go to what's called a soil moisture sensor. Right now, you're supposed to have a rain shutoff sensor. How many have an notice the term operational rain shutoff on your irrigation system? When's the last time you checked it? Everybody has an irrigation system. Raise your hand. Operational rain shutoff. Do you see a difference?
Yes.
All those people who put their hands down are breaking the law.
Yeah.
You know how when you go over the toll bridge going to St. Pete's, they send you that photo that you have to pay the toll? The camera right up there. You will be getting your bills in the mail, so don't worry about it. That's why we had you sign in and stuff like that. Oh my goodness. Now, inside that little rain shutoff are cork rings. And those cork rings kind of degrade in about 2 years. So if you haven't tested it within the last 2 years, then it's probably not operational. If your rain sensor is mounted by the air conditioning unit, it will dry out faster because of the wind coming out of the unit. If your unit is attached to your house underneath your eave, it has never worked because it was never exposed to rain. If it's on your gutter and the tree is now covering it now, it no longer works. The nice thing is we now make Bluetooth rain sensors, so you don't have to drill more holes through your walls and stuff like that. They will actually talk to each other. So, but you need to have one of those. And really by regulation, you shouldn't have anybody to come out and work on your irrigation system unless you have an operational rain shutoff. The easiest way to test it is to make sure it's on auto, and that's on. If you have a controller that doesn't have that setting, you need to update your controller to have that setting. And then the easiest thing after it's running, put it on manual and throw some water on it, and it should shut the system off. Now the misnomer about that shutoff is it doesn't just shut it off during the rain. It's supposed to absorb moisture in those cork rings, and that weight of the water triggers it to go down. And it may take several days after rain before it will allow your system to work again. So that's what a rain shutoff is. How many times a year should you check your system? Well, the problem is if it comes on before you get up, how do you know that it's working right? When we go out, we turn it on during the day and it's watering the roads and all those things like that. We went out to an HOA who will remain nameless in Venice off of Jacaranda, right across from the golf course, that happened to be right at the 30-mile-an-hour sign. That sounds something like Cove Oint, but we won't name any like that. See, I told you we would use you if you asked us to come out. And they have almost 26, 27 valves and stations, and we only got through the first 2 because as we were looking at them, just in the first zone, there were 2 houses, and in the first house we found 3 underground leaks. One to the point that I was standing in 2 inches of water after the system had only been on for like 15 minutes. So if you don't know if you really have an operational system, then first of all, your plants aren't getting what they need, and then also you're wasting water. Void watering landscapes, well, that rain gauge, okay. Automatic system, we've talked about that by law.
That's you.
It's me again. All right. Notice the name of this slide. It says Fertilize Appropriately. So what am I really going to say about that? Tonight when I get home, there's 3 different flavors of ice cream in my freezer. And I will feel compelled to eat at least one of every scoop of every one of those. Do I need it? Probably not. But the whole thing is at certain points in time, plants need nutrients. As we start looking at this, how many of you have ever done a soil test to even know that you need fertilizer? Is this thing on? You notice how when you're talking, they're all happy and everything like that? She gives me these just so she doesn't have to be the Debbie Downer of the group. Yeah, it's all planned. That's why I went 2 in a row. Did you notice that? Yeah. She picks the nice ones she wants to do. pH. How many understand pH? All right, and you know as our pH goes up in our soils, above neutral into the alkaline, that some nutrients can be tied up. So in simple terms, I may show deficiencies in my plants, and I can put more of that element out, and my plants will not change because the soil is binding it too tight that the plant can't get it. Does that make sense? So unless you really know what's in your soil, you're not supposed to be putting more out because it may never solve the problem that you're trying to solve. The other thing is that fertilizer is a stressor, kind of like I am to Wilma. When she's healthy, I pick on her more, and when she's weak, I pick on her even more because that's what gets her healthier and stronger faster. But the thing is, it's not a medicine. And like anything else, we're supposed to follow directions. So part of that Fertilize Appropriately is calculating. A quiz. How much nitrogen can you apply at any one point in time to your lawn per 1,000 square feet? 1 pound. So when's the last time you calibrated your spreader to only put out? When's the last time you measured your lawn to know how many square feet you have, to know how many pounds of nitrogen? Do you know how to count? How many just open the bag, dump it in the thing, or have your maintenance people just fertilize? Yeah, I know. Wow. How many of you are fertilizing appropriately? Ouch. And yet we give them driver's licenses. That's a silly thing here. They're self-professed bad fertilizers, and then they're going to get in their cars tonight and go home and fertilize or something like that. All right. Use a broadcast spreader with the shield. You're not supposed to water, or you're not supposed to fertilize waterways and stuff like that. All fertilizers you use here have to be registered to be used in Florida. How many of you read labels on the things you buy at the grocery store? Okay. When you go to look at the fertilizer, if you turn it over in the back, there's an ingredients label. And on the very top all the way across, it's going to have an F serial number. It'll say like F and 4 numerals. If it doesn't have that, that fertilizer is not registered to be used in Florida. So you can't go to North Carolina on holiday and see the fertilizer sale and buy a bunch and bring it down here, because once again, you're breaking the law. Next, you're going to talk about what, mulch and butterflies or something like that, yeah. You're breaking the law. All right, 50% has to be slow-release nitrogen. Proper scheduling. How many of you live in an HOA? Okay, look at now some audience participation. And how many of your HOAs fertilize between October and February? You should all keep your hands up. Because I read all the contracts. Is that appropriate? How many of you have ever been in the hospital and they wake you up in the middle of the night to take your vitals and give you a sleeping pill? Kind of makes about the same amount of sense. You don't fertilize when the lawn is not growing. So therefore, you don't need. How many of you have a landscape maintenance company that fertilized on October 1st? If you're in an HOA, they did. How do I know? I read your contracts. Because that was the end of the fertilizer ban. So why do you give yourself a stimulant when you're getting ready to go to bed? We just came through winter. Plants do go dormant. I know that's hard to believe because they're not brown looking, but they are dormant, which means they need to slow down. How many of you mow your lawn every week during winter? Every 2 weeks? Every 3 weeks? So if you're not mowing, it's not growing. So then why are you watering it like it was growing during summer and spring, and why are you fertilizing it? I think we could probably reduce fertilizers by 50% if we just stopped fertilizing in the off season. So when do you fertilize? When the plant's growing. Never fertilize within 10 feet of any body of water, and there's no nitrogen or phosphorus according to county regulations and ordinances between June 1st and September 30th. I'm not even going to bother myself with this one. Oh, there's weed and feed in here. I feel like that whole calculating thing. All right. They don't even measure. What's a weed and feed? You've seen the brothers on TV in spring. They have to do the weed and feed. Well, the weed part is an herbicide. And the feed part is a fertilizer. And in extension, we do never recommend putting out a chemical that doesn't have a purpose. So there's no sense in putting out an herbicide if you don't have need for it. There's no sense in putting an herbicide over your whole yard if you have 2 weeds. I always say, bend over and pull it. Because the other things that you're killing besides the 2 weeds are all the other beneficial insects and everything that are in the lawn. And believe me, there's a lot. And so all those unintended purposes. Here's something that really gets to people. By the way, if you watch my pointer, I can point to here, but these screens are non-pointer. So see what I'm pointing to? Doesn't ring it. Do not fertilize new turf for 30 to 60 days after planting. How many have ever put fertilizer down on the soil and then put sod down? They're not going to say they are now. Kind of made you gun shy, haven't I? But the problem is the root system is going to grow faster if it has to go search for nutrients. Time and time again. You have a better root system and a better grass if you don't fertilize after newly planted. Over-fertilizing can do a whole bunch of things besides draining your pocketbook. Stimulate excessive growth. As horticulturists, we have to be purveyors of the weather. What's the low this week in Sarasota County? It's supposed to be 42. Now, if you had fertilized 2 weeks ago and your plant started to grow because we were in the 80s, then that growth would be thin and the cell walls would be thin. And because we have a lot of tropical plants anyway, that amount of new flush could get cold damage on if we reach 42. Because just because it says 42 doesn't mean in Northport, at Wilma's house, she's not going to get ice on the window, and then she's going to have to take a picture and post it, writing ice with her credit card, so that now I know why she's late for work. It's the same picture year after year. She's reusing it. I know that one by now. It says you aggravate pest problems. Well, you stress the plant more. Remember, fertilizer is a stressor, so if I over-fertilize, I overstress. And if the plant is overstressed, have you ever been overstressed and caught a cold? Yeah. Kind of makes the same way. Requires frequent watering, runoff, and all those other things like that. And we're all on watershed, and it all collects.
Mulch. Okay, I'll answer your question actually talking about mulch. One of the reasons we don't recommend rocks is because it's not natural, it doesn't break down. One of the reasons we want to mulch because it helps build the soil up. Organic mulch breaks down over time and it builds the soil up, it adds organic matter. But the other reasons we mulch are to help hold moisture in the soil, help prevent weeds. It's not going to prevent weed seeds from blowing in and growing down through it, but it does make a huge difference. It's a lot easier to pull out of the mulch than out of just regular soil. So it does inhibit that weed growth. And protects from mechanical damage when you have the landscapers weed eating around your plants. How many times do you see damage on a tree or a tree half dead because of that damage? That makes quite a bit of difference as well. And it's much more aesthetic to look at mulched areas than to see soil. See, I remember to say the right word. Soil bouncing up on your plants and making a mess. It's nicer to see the mulch because it helps hold that soil in place and it's not splashing up on the house or up on the plants.
Question. What about using pine needles?
Pine needles is excellent. Pine needles, any kinds of leaves that fall off the trees are always excellent to use. The leaves, if you don't like the look, you can always top dress it with a thin layer of mulch, but those leaves are going to break down and make it, they are really, really beneficial to the soil. So that's what creating this self-mulching area is. Pine needles, not next to a house if you're in a fire-prone area, but out. If you're not in a fire-prone area, it's probably okay next to the house, but you got to consider that because they do burn easy if there was a fire. Using alternative byproducts, recycled mulch is one of the reasons they say that is because people used to use cypress mulch all the time. In cypress mulch, they've started cutting down 100-year-old trees just to keep up with that industry. And that's not sustainable. But, I mean, those beautiful trees now gone. So they're recommending using things like the floral mulch or pine bark nuggets, stuff that are byproducts of industry, lumber industry. The pine needles and the barks come from that industry. So using something like that. Or recycled, but the lawn companies cutting trees down and grinding that up. Those all make good mulches. You should always put a 2 to 3 inch layer of mulch, and that's after it settles. And you don't just year after year add new mulch on top. How many have a HOA that just keeps adding more mulch every year? Yeah, we've seen dead plants because of too much mulch, where they were just completely buried. You should always leave the mulch 2 to 3 inches away from the trunks of any of your plants, the stems. That'll kill a plant faster than anything, and plus you can get beetles, moles, things in there around start chewing on the bark. You're going to lose the plants faster, and you can get fungus in there around the stems, so that makes a huge difference.
Do you know how much your HOA spends on mulch a year?
Oh, a lot of money.
We have some HOAs in Sarasota County that spend over $100,000 a year in mulch.
And we've saved a couple of them that $100,000. You say, if you mulch again, you're going to kill all your plants. they wouldn't give us the money, though, that they save.
We say it's the Wilma and Pat retirement funds, but, they still don't.
Yep. So selecting a mulch, number one is what you like, what color you like. If the pine needles is your favorite mulch, rocks could be used. We don't recommend them, but some people would prefer that. Some places prohibit the little pieces of gravel because of storms, wind, tornadoes, hurricanes. They can blow around more and they're going to cause more damage. But mainly color, scent, texture, those are all things people are going to use to pick something out. How long it's going to last, how durable it is. Some stuff breaks down a lot faster. I used some pine needles in a path once, and every time I walked on it, it broke them up. They didn't even last a year, but they would have been okay in the beds if I had used something different for the paths. So you got to think about things like that, the walkability and stuff. Availability, price, where you can find it from, things like that. How fast it's going to break down. One of the things, a lot of people like to use the colored mulch. There hasn't been enough studying from the university to know what happens to the chemicals that colored it in the first place. So we don't really recommend those because you don't know changes that it might be making to the soil. So you got to consider all these things together.
The termites never eat my rock.
Yeah, they don't eat melaleuca mulch either.
What about having landscape cloth underneath the mulch?
We don't recommend that.
Unless you're doing rock.
Yeah, unless you're doing rock, because that keeps the rocks from soaking in more. It will help it to last a little bit longer, but the problems with the landscape fabric is the roots don't spread out right. I know the water is supposed to go through, but it doesn't, and the roots will have a tendency to bunch up right under there, and then if we have a drought or something, it's really going to cause problems. We had some landscape fabric around a tree at work because I was ordered to put it there, and
Not by me.
My coworker said, "What idiot put that there?" I said, "Bob, that was me." And he forgot. And every time he thought he saw that landscape fabric, he said, "I can't understand why some idiot put that there." I'm like, well, it just happened to get there. Anyways, attracting wildlife.
Is this mine?
Yeah. You don't like wildlife. It's really, really important to create habitats.
She is spreading truths here.
Yeah, that wasn't true. Well, never mind. I like wildlife. I like butterflies and birds and bees, and I try to attract a lot of them to my yard. And because you saw that picture where by 2060, there's going to be 40 million people in the state of Florida, because there's already 20 million. So if we don't create corridors for the wildlife, where are they going to go? What are they going to do? We still need to eat. We still need our plants to be pollinated. People still do plant vegetable gardens, and they have fruit trees. We need to have those to produce. If we don't have any wildlife, any birds and bees, and plus, how many people here like watching birds? How many are bird watchers? See, we have a few people that like that. I'm not a true bird watcher. I don't have a life list or anything, but I get excited when I see a new kind in my yard. It's really, really fun to see blue jays and cardinals and things like that. So if we create habitats for them, and some people don't want to get rid of their lawn, you don't have to get rid of your lawn, but could you get rid of 5 feet of it? Could you convince your neighbor maybe to get rid of 5 feet of theirs and plant plants for the birds and the butterflies and the bees? You're not really hurting anything, but that creates a corridor for birds to fly from one area to the next, for the bees to fly from one area to the next. And it's not that much of your yard gone. If you have the room and the space and the inclination, you could create larger areas. But it does make a huge difference. One of the things is to limit the amount of lawn, cut down on some lawn. That would be for creating the corridors, but in any lawn, if you're trying to create habitat, you want more than one kind of plant. We go out to HOAs and maybe they use 5 different species of plants. And
Sometimes they go all the way up to like 7 or 8.
Yes. None of them are really attractive. They're just ornamental plants. They're just green leaves, sometimes just variegated leaf, and maybe one with a big leaf, one with a small leaf, but none of them attract anything. It's not a friendly atmosphere. So a variety of plants, varying heights. You need the canopy, you need the understory, you need the ground covers, because even different butterflies, some will nectar up far on a tree, some in the middle, and some down low. You have all these variations, and you need to supply for different things. And the more diverse an area is, you're going to create more of a variety. You want to attract birds and bees. There's bats in Florida. There's 13 species of bats. So I've had a couple people say they unfolded their umbrella. They'd been up all winter and some bats fell out of it. And I've seen that happen once. And that can happen, but you can also put up bat houses. Sometimes they attract bats, sometimes they don't. They have certain specific areas where they need to go and face certain ways. Frogs and toads, if you have a little pond or something, they eat a lot of insects. Snakes, how many of you want a snake? Not too many. Oh, cool. We got a couple people. I love snakes. I have snakes in my yard, not a lot of them, and mostly just black racers. I have a snake in my house. It doesn't get to get out or crawl around, but it's in a little cage. Snakes are nice. They're fun. I have to teach snake classes. That's why I have the snake. I figured I needed to learn a little bit more about them, but they eat a lot. They eat rats, mice, palmetto bugs. How many like palmetto bugs? Ugh. I wish my snake ate those. But anyway, he doesn't. But they're good for different things. If you don't like snakes, there's things you can do to prevent them, but maybe attract more butterflies and no snakes. But you need to provide a little bit of shelter, and that's usually just in the form of plants. You don't have to have any building for them or anything, not that kind of shelter. But the diverse and layered plant palette will make a difference. And of course, avoid pesticides. People ask, and I told you earlier, why aren't they seeing birds and butterflies in their yards? Well, your neighbor sprays, and that neighbor sprays, and that one across the street sprays. You're going to see less and less. You can build up your habitat, but if everybody's spraying around you, it's a lot harder to get them in. So the pesticides is probably the worst thing. To create habitats, your food, water, shelter, cover, space, they're going to come through an area, they might nectar, they might come in and eat, but if you don't supply them with those things, they're not going to stay, they're not going to reproduce. So you're just creating some of those things to help keep them there. Water, you got to have water for a habitat, and almost even people like to hear running water, like to see water, and it's requirement for life. So any of your birds, especially if you're trying to attract frogs and turtles and things like that, obviously you need even more water, but just a small dish of water will attract birds, bees, butterflies. They need water, and they will come to a little watering dish that you have set out. Butterflies need areas to puddle, to gather nutrients, minerals from the soil. So you can create that on your own with a little dish of water and put some sand in it, and they can get the nutrients from that. So you've got to think of all those things. And of course, berries, seeds, go back to the right plant, right place. Any of those kinds of plants. And that's just a shrub. It doesn't have to be a whole big yard full or a whole hedgerow. You can put one plant. It can be a specimen plant that has berries on it. But think about different times of the year to attract different animals different times too. So you can have a shrub that blooms in January and one that blooms in March and one in June. You can plant a little bit of variety, and maybe some of them bloom year-round, like your firebush or beautyberry or something like that, that you have berries longer and flowers longer to attract more. That's you.
I know. Couple different things to add on what Wilma said about attracting wildlife. How many people like butterflies? You know there's a difference between pollinating plants and host plants, right? The pollinating plants will attract the adults, and the host plants will be consumed by their larvae. So if you want butterflies in your yard, plant the pollinating plants and then give your neighbors the host plants. It will work.
Yeah, well.
And then the other thing, just to kind of bring this all home. Wilma and I would like to come over to somebody's house for dinner. Who would like to have us come over? You really don't have to, but just be brave and raise your hand.
Definitely.
All right, definitely. I like that. So what are we having?
Well, first you've got to check out the yard.
It's dark, so we'll do that tomorrow. See, I don't come over at 4 o'clock because then I'm not eating till 6. I know this drill. But anyway, so after dinner, we'll do the dishes, and then we're going to bulldoze your house.
No.
But see, we had no qualms about doing that to nature that was here before we're living in our dwelling. So I think it's really important that we restore some of the habitats that we go. All right, managing landscapes, pests responsibly. What are the 2 insects in the slide? Ladybug and an aphid. If I had a slide up there with 20 insects, 10 beneficial and 10 damaging, could you identify them all? And see, there's the problem. We have people come in and say, I've been trying to get rid of this pest in my yard. And so, well, do you have something? You have a picture of it. And they show us, and, oh, well, that's a beneficial insect. And they've been spraying sprays on it for months, and to the point where they're killing the plants, they've got so many sprays on it, and nature was coming in. I always like to say, how many of you had to duck from biblical hordes of locusts as you were coming into City Hall tonight? And that's because nature reacts. Anytime there's a food supply increase, the predators that feed on that will increase until everything's stable again. And then lastly, you realize that your yard is the buffet. And so the insects that are going to chew on your plants will come in first, but you have to allow the beneficial ones to come in second. All right? How many of you scout your yard? Really go out and know what's in there? I used to teach at a university, and I was a horticulture professor, and the students would come in during the greenhouse class, and they'd say, Dr. Williams, my bench is all full of insects. And I said, gosh, how did that happen overnight? Because yesterday it must have been perfect. Well, the thing is, when you start looking at responsible, you have to know what's in your yard. You have to know what's happening before it gets to the point where you feel like you have to react. We have this thing called integrated pest management. And it was around long before Wilma started working in the 90s. And the whole thing is we used to have one scenario. See bugs, spray first. Spray second, spray third, spray fourth. Are we making superbugs? We are. Do insects mutate? Yes. They do. How fast? I was at the New York University Medical Center for 5 years in New York City, and I ran a horticultural therapy program, and we had cockroaches really bad. And so facility said, we've got this brand new product. They came out, they used a caulking gun, and they put it everywhere. Long story shorter, because we're running out of time, thousands of dead cockroaches. The really cool thing is there's thousands of dead cockroaches. Ooh, was that I've been working here and eating my lunch with thousands of cockroaches. Or, as they say in Florida, palmetto bugs. Yeah, whatever. That's what they are, folks. The realtor said, we have a few, no, cockroaches. And the greenhouse was open. Some outside ones came in, got to the point where we applied it. We canceled patient programs because we thought we'd have thousands upon thousands. There was some dead. By the third time we applied the paste, we didn't even see any. So within 3 generations, cockroaches mutated enough to be resistant to the chemical. So we have to be careful what we put out, and that's part of that responsible. How many live in an HOA again? How many even understand the chemicals they're putting out in your environment? We were just at a HOA. I was last Friday in Nokomis. I won't say what it was because it was a bad one, but they sprayed everything in January. Why? They had no bugs. You're not supposed to spray unless you see the pest. Let me give you an example. You didn't even bring up the hippopotamus society.
Yeah, no, I didn't.
Okay. I agree with all that, except I was told that there were hippopotamus in my neighborhood. And so every month religiously I spray a hippopotamus aside. And it works. I've had no hippopotami in my yard. So I don't mind spending the extra money. 5, 4, 3. Not everybody got it yet, so I'm kind of waiting. 2, 1. You see, that kind of seems silly, right? So why spray every plant in all the lawns in your HOA when you have nothing? And if you don't understand residuals and things like that, or if you don't know the classes of the chemicals, if you live in an HOA, it's the responsibility of your landscape committee, your board, to have on file all the chemicals, not just, oh, we will spray for you. Okay? Because you don't know what they're doing. Never have as needed, because that's the excuse just to spray. Well, I saw a bug, or I thought I saw a bug. If they want to spray, they should get approval, and they should show you that you have the insect before they spray your property. And they should never spray your whole property, because your whole property is not infested. They should spot treat. We do contract reviews for HOAs. It's part of our service. So if you ever want to know what it should look like, you can let us know. But anyway, chemical is the last resort, and then it's the least toxic chemical and the most targeted. Have you ever heard of BT? Bacillus thuringiensis. It's a very low toxicity targeted. So it will not kill ladybugs, it won't even kill aphids, but it will kill Lepidoptera larvae such as butterfly and moths. You didn't tell them about the story about the person who went to the butterfly garden and then complained because they had no butterflies, and then when asked why, they said, well, because we had all those caterpillars and we sprayed them dead. But do you know what ladybug eggs look like? If you're in the audience and I give this example, I apologize, but I have to give you a real-life example. We got sent a picture of eggs on the side of a house, and the resident wanted to know what they were. And so, it's an egg. And she said, well, I brushed it off with a broom. Okay, we'll never see them hatch out, so I don't know. So either they were like 300 beneficial insects for their yard, but they're all gone now. We can't identify eggs, so be careful. Observe plants regularly, check. What is physical control? How many parents do we have in the audience? How many ever got number 2 on your hand when you were changing a diaper? So really, you should not be squeamish about squishing a bug in the landscape. But make sure it's a bad bug before you squish it. So you have to identify these things. Biologicals, other bugs. Lorraine got up. She's making me nervous now. I was like, time to run, gotta run fast. Any questions? Oh, no. Do you know something as simple as a yellow piece of plastic sprayed with a vegetable oil will attract a lot of the insects in your yard? And then if you get a lot of insects on there, it's called an indicator card. Then you can just wash it off and then reapply.
Paper or plastic?
It's usually something that's coated, because the oil, if it's just paper, will...
Where do you get that?
You can buy it at craft stores and stuff like that, just a sheet of plastic, cut it up. That's what I used to do for the greenhouse. Very low cost. And chemicals, as we said, avoid the shotgun with treating everything in your yard, because everything doesn't need to be treated. This is you. She did make me nervous. Look at her up there. Don't look, don't look.
So, first of all, what's wrong with that picture? Green fronds were pruned off of the tree. They help supply the tree, the palm tree, with nutrients. If you have a pile like that, you're hurting your palm trees. We see it all the time. It's not good. But other leaves and things like that, already dead leaves, we say remove only brown, and you should only be removing brown on palm trees. But any leaves that you rake up, you really should be using them back in the yard. Palm trees, they take too long to break down, the palm fronds, but any other kinds of leaf. It is against the law to dispose of yard waste in lined landfills. That's why they have the separate piles. I know people that don't pay attention to that, and they throw everything into one bin. Unfortunately, that's not good, but by using leaves in your landscape and leaving the lawn clippings on the lawn, you're returning nutrients to the lawn. You should tell them all those nutrients.
Oh, now it's like... I was at Boca Royale in Gulf down in Inglewood, and when I put this one on there, somebody said it wasn't bound together. So I had to give them a book.
They're not cut into 4-foot sections either.
Now,
Any-
the grass clipping, is that what you want me to tell them?
Yeah.
That grass clipping that you're returning to your lawn and that dead leaf that fell off the tree, do you know how many nutrients are in that? So here we go. Ready? Keep count. We have carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. Then we have boron, chlorine, copper, maybe some cobalt, iron, manganese, molybdenum, maybe some nickel, and zinc. Find that on the back of a fertilizer.
Yeah.
Touche.
So why do we have those? I mean, why do people pay for people to come out and fertilize and all that?
They fertilize.
Hold all questions to the end.
Wait.
See how I enforced that one? Wilma caved in when she did the whole other questions like that.
People fertilize more than they need to, but anyways, because by recycling your yard waste, you are returning nutrients to your soil.
And because people just don't know.
That's the biggest, probably, people don't know. Okay. Using your fallen leaves, using pine needles under your trees and shrubs, self-mulching areas. It's better to have one big bed than little tiny beds around each plant. It's easier for mowers to get through. It's more aesthetically pleasing to have those on there, and you create those areas. If you can, create a compost pile. A lot of people in HOAs can't, but if you have a place where you can put one, like I have an area between me and my neighbor, and I was going to put a compost bin. I said, oh, it wouldn't be nice. It's too close to their house. But they're outside smoking all the time, and their dog poop is always left in their yard. So I said, that's a perfect place for me to put my compost bin. Anyways, so, you know, you can locate it somewhere that's not offensive to other people. And if your HOAs, a lot of them don't, like I say, don't allow it. But if you can, it's a good way to get some extra nutrients, break down even little worm bins. They can be inside in a closet or something, and they're breaking down all your kitchen scraps, and then you can use that out in your yard. Good nutrient.
And you know, you could actually just scrape away some of the bark and dig a little bit of a hole and put your food scraps right in the ground and cover over it, and they will decompose.
And adds to your plants. Leave your grass clippings on the lawn because it has all those elements in there.
Go ahead and repeat those, Wilma. Go ahead, just repeat those. Just go ahead.
Yeah, I can repeat 5 or 6 of them.
You want me to go now, or are you just thinking still?
Yeah. Anyway, you want to keep them out of the nearest body of water. You see those lawn companies blowing them down in the drain. That, number one, is illegal. But when those nutrients get into the water, they deplete nitrogen. They can cause fish kills. Or they don't deplete nitrogen. They deplete oxygen. They add nitrogen to the water. So that's really, really bad. And you can have that happen really easy.
This is mine. All right, reduce stormwater runoff. Have you ever seen a picture of Venice, like when Wilma was a child? No houses, some little huts and stuff like that.
You know, with your beard, you look older than me.
But I'm not. I can shave, and I'm young. You are just old, so.
Oh, well.
She tries to pick on me, but I came from a big family of picker-honors, and we're all ready for those things. But the whole thing is we've created so many roofs, and how many of your downspouts from your roof go onto your driveway? Well, then it goes right to the street. There's no chance to percolate. We have driveways, we have roads, and we have all these other things. And if you really start looking at the bays and the estuaries, we started killing off things like the oysters because we had so much fresh water running into the bays that we were changing the salinity, and those species were dying. And so part of our water reclamation is to slow that down. How many of you have a house that has a lake view, which is really just a detention or retention pond? But it was sold to you as a lake view, And if we grow anything around it, then we complain because we can't see the lake, which is just a retention, a detention pond once again. But the whole thing is everything's going to lead to the Gulf eventually. And we have to slow it down, and we want it to go in on property. How many of you have ever been to Wilma's rain barrels? She teaches a class on rain barrels. And you can actually water quite a bit of your landscape with rain barrels. It's not potable, so you can't drink it. You can put in things. Instead of putting in a concrete sidewalk, put in a porous material. Or use pavers, but don't solidify them together with mortar. And all that stuff will kind of drain down. The biggest thing is we want the water to stay on property as long as possible. Everybody in Sarasota County lives in a watershed, and if you ever look back to the old historic, it was just filled with all these little ponds and things like that. Currently, I think we have over 6,600 retention and detention ponds in Sarasota County. And you notice every time there's a new development, the first thing that goes in, they have to dig the pond because they have to keep the water on site, and then they can charge more for the lake view. There's really a reason why they do that. It's not because they really want to, oh yes it is, they want to be friendly. Put in swales and stuff like that. It keeps all the water there, and eventually it will percolate down. I drive early in the morning when I go to Walmart, 6 o'clock. I really don't like people. I should have told you that earlier. But now it's pretty evident, right? And I'm always amazed at how there's so much dew on the trees that it makes those circles in the road. And then I look up and there's no trees, and I wonder how the water got on the roads in circles, and it's Sunday morning, you can't water on Sunday. And once again, we're using lots of water that we don't need to. Rain barrels, I've got 4 at the house, and I use them to water all the time. Wilma offers a rain barrel once a month, and it goes between...
Generally the 3rd Saturday, but sometimes we had to change a couple to the 2nd Saturday this year.
And all of our classes are listed on our county website, plus Eventbrite if you've ever used that.
Which was on the bookmark. If you picked one up, the county website was on there.
And lastly, protect the waterfront. This is mine, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Have you wondered what the little orange and blue dots are in the corners? That was to tell Wilma and I when to talk. I got orange, she got blue. Everybody lives pretty close to water. And the whole thing is how many of you are from Florida? We forgot to ask that. Florida natives.
1, 2,
3.
Wow.
So everybody else from out of town? Do you even know what Florida really looks like anymore? We come down, but the whole thing is the reason you moved down here because you were close to the water. It's all of our job to protect this water, and we say things educational-wise that if you have a body of water, you should not be mowing within 10 feet of the water. And then we get kicked back because people don't like the looks of it because it gets messy, whatever. It depends on, you can plant, you just don't have to have tall grass. But the whole thing is to keep pollutants out of the water. And we've gone out to people who are putting in new seawalls along the coast, and they want to put grass right up to the seawall so they can fertilize it and blow clippings and everything into the water. And we try our best, but ultimately it's all of our job. We want to leave things for our kids, our grandkids, et cetera, Wilma's already told you the amount of people that are going to be influxed, and we have to start fixing the problem. Not just maintaining the problem, but we have to start fixing the problem. Establish a buffer zone around all these things. Plant the right plant. Remove invasives. Protect the shoreline. What are invasives? These are most of the landscaping plants that we sold people 50, 40, 30 years ago, like Australian pine and Brazilian pepper and carrot wood and all those things like that are everywhere. Does this appeal to you? Yes. And that's solving a lot. So part of this is the education and showing people what things can look like versus just letting lawn get really tall and unruly around the water's edge. Because some of these plants will bloom, and then the next thing you know, you have birds and other things and all those horrible things that Wilma likes to attract to the yard. And we are done early. So we can take one question, just one. Oh, see, there's 4 questions. I don't know who to ask now, so good night, everybody. Oh.